Hello, hello, and welcome everybody to another Arts Insights Live. My name is Nagam Weeby, President of Arts Consulting Group, and I'm delighted to have you with us today. It's hard to believe that we've been gathering for these conversations for nearly a year now in a consistent biweekly manner. During that time, we have explored many of the opportunities and challenges shaping the arts and culture sector. And one of the things I have appreciated most is that from the very beginning, we've made this more a thoughtful dialogue and coming here not with the answers, but just to talk about things together. Whether you have joined us from the very beginning or you're tuning in for the first time today, thank you for being here. If you are joining us live, we always say if you can put in the comments from where you're joining us, let us know location or the organization. And throughout the conversation, if you have any questions or reflections or even comments about what we're talking about, feel free to use the comments below and put your questions and reflections there. Today's topic is about strategic planning. Strategic planning has long been a cornerstone of organizational leadership, yet today many organizations are asking more of the process than simply producing a 3 or 5 year plan. It's about creating alignment, it's about strengthening decision making and building the organizational conditions that enable lasting impact and that enable the implementation of a plan. And our title for today is Strategic Planning Beyond the Plan, Building the Conditions for Lasting Change, explores that evolution. So our guests for today are folks that we love and we worked with the past year from the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. The Native Arts and Culture Foundation is a national Native-led organization that supports Native artists and communities through funding, leadership development, and partnerships that strengthen Native arts and cultures across the country. I'm pleased to be joined by 3 wonderful guests today. Shyla Spicer is President and CEO of the Native Arts and Culture Foundations. She's an enrolled citizen of the Yakama Nation. She brings more than 20 years of leadership experience and is dedicated to strengthening Native arts, artists, and communities. She stepped into the organization's leadership in late 2023, succeeding founding president Lulani Arquette. Also with us, will be joining us today, Gabriela Taliacozo, and she's the COO at the organization who has lived through nearly the entire arc of this organization's growth, from its early fellowship programs to the transfer of its Portland building to this most recent planning process. With more than 25 years of nonprofit leadership experience, she oversees the organization's operations and helps advance its mission through collaborative, value-based leadership. And then last but not least, we'll also be joined by our own ACG team member, Jason Najum, who's the Vice President at Arts Consulting Group and the lead of our planning and capacity building practice. Jason and I co-led this process with Gabriela and Shyla from the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. And Jason has spent more than 15 years leading and advising mission-driven organization. Happy to have the 3 of you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive into, first, I just want to ask, before we even talk about the specifics, what is strategic plan in your own words? What does strategic planning mean to you? Maybe we'll start with you, Jason, since you're the lead of our planning and capacity building.
Yeah, for me, strategic planning is everything that is organizational leadership wrapped up into one concept. It both grounds the organization in its founding mission and vision, but then charts an organization's path from where it is today to where it wants to go, and hopefully in the process aligns the organization around common values.
What about you, Shyla and Gabriela? Any specific thoughts or definitions that come to mind when you think about strategic planning?
Lots of thoughts. It really was when I think of strategic planning, it really is an introspective look of how the organization is currently operating. What do we know about the future? what are some areas that we know that our biggest strengths are, and how are we going to utilize those strengths to drive the mission and grow the organization. The strategic direction is mostly decided on what is currently happening in today's society, what are funding models, and what are kind of the areas and where, like, for example, our organization can actually start to drive impact. So it really was a large landscape, broad look at how we believe that we can actually drive the future. And then if that's the case, then how do you organize the focus over the top of that? And therein lies the strategic plan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Gabriella, I want to ask you, what were the leadership questions or realities that made it the right moment to invest in this kind of process for the Native Arts and Culture Foundation?
Yeah, so I think there were several factors, Nagam. Firstly, we had come to the end of our previous strategic plan, which went from 2020 to 2025. But probably most importantly, we were at an inflection point in the organization with new leadership. We had the transition from the founding president and CEO to Shyla, who was a new leader coming in with a new vision for the organization. We were also at a point where we were gifted the building that you briefly mentioned in the introduction, which created a new set of opportunities and challenges for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
We had a board of directors that was new in a way, and that was very different from the board of directors in 2020 that generated that strategic plan. We had many new staff members. Probably 80% of our staff were less than 3 years on the job. So it was really a fertile moment to bring everybody together, look at where we've been, where we were, and where we're going, and go through this process.
Yeah. And I think those are important identifiers. I think if the people who are listening, if there's those questions, I mean, it's not just about the strategic plan that you had ending, but those different aspects that can be good trigger to start a new planning process in a way. Jason, I know you and I have conversations all the time on the ACG side. How can we make the strategic planning, the process and the deliverables impact beyond the plan? In your experience, what separates a strategic planning process that produces a document from one that genuinely changes the way an organization thinks, decides, and leads? And then I want to hear from Shyla too, because she kind of like started talking about it in the earlier about that differentiator of a process in a way.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase, strategic plan, right? The word plan, which sounds like a document, is in it as if that's the only purpose, right? But I actually find that what makes these processes have the most vitality, the most long-term impact, is a focus on the process, right? And it really should be the case, if it's successful, that everyone who was involved in the process, who is ultimately the organization, like they make up the organization, that they're changed somehow by the process itself. I think the other key piece is when it does produce a plan, it is then designed in a way, in the organization's voice, with input from not just leadership in the board, but from the rank and file staff, so that it actually, is feasible and is implementable.
Shyla, what's your take on that? And how because you both were, Gabriella and Shyla, you both were on the leadership staff, our partner in this process. But what is your take on the importance of the process beyond just the plan and what we're going to do? And how did you drive that in that process too, as a new leader to the organization?
Yeah, we didn't really start out going, okay, we're going to really be very thoughtful about the process, right? We were like just trying to get to the end, really, and like playing along to be like, okay, here are all the things, here are all the steps, and we would go through the steps, right? And then it wasn't until we realized that the board wasn't aligned, right? we saw that there was that we needed to back up quite a bit. We needed to think and go a little slower. We actually needed to align on the most foundational topics: mission, vision, value. Are we still good there from where we started and from its origin? We did have quite a lot of new board members, plus I was new leadership. So the process wasn't how we designed it from the beginning, right? We had to slow down and double click down in each of the areas of the process to make sure that we could move forward each time together. And it was really important to be collaborative, because that's how we lead. How Gabby and I have decided that we're a collaborative, cross-functional group. That also means that we needed alignment. We needed people to be comfortable. We wanted to hear the voices. We wanted to really know what we didn't know. So we had to go a little slower than we expected. You two were along the journey the entire way, being very patient with us, and really helping us think through how we're going to bring these people along. How are we going to have these really difficult conversations if we needed to? And how are we going to derive the right information? Or are we asking the right questions? And I think that created the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the next step? What do we not know? What do we need to ask a little differently of ourselves? Because I've worked in strategy almost my whole career. And so I was just like, here's what we got to do. Let's just go. I already know what we got to do. I was ready, and I had the direction ready. I was like, I've already done the landscape. I've already been in the field. Here's what's going to happen. And I don't know if other CEOs feel like that. They're like, okay, come on, guys, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Just finished our last. We just completed our last strategic direction and plan. We hired a whole bunch of people. We need focus. Let's go now. And that was a big lesson for myself. Even having experience in this space, it was. You can only go as fast as your organization is ready, and that was a big learning lesson for me. Because for me, I'm like, okay, I know what we got to do, guys. Follow me, let's go. And that was an eye-opening experience, and the process was designed to go as fast as the organization needed it to, and go and find the information we needed to make the most sound decisions.
Yeah, that's really important, because even with Jason and I, as we write proposals for strategic planning process, we're like, okay, well, this is like the framework and how to get from A to B, but then we're partners with the organizations, and the goal is the success of this. It's not just checking the boxes. So how can we be adaptable, and how can we slow down, speed up, move things around, sometimes exchange facilitators, like whatever is needed to make this successful. Gabriella, from where you're standing, I mean, and as leadership, did those conversations with the different interest holders, the different communities, whether the board, the staff, did they simply reaffirm the organization's identity, or did they reveal opportunities to rethink how the organization define its role and impact within the ecosystem?
Oh, I think it was the latter. It did give us an opportunity to redefine our strategic and organizational identity to some levels. What I happen to like about the process, even though it can be frustrating sometimes, is that it's a circular process, right? It's not a linear process where you go from A to B. You lay out the agendas, you lay out the timeline, and it all looks so nice. But when you get into it and you start having those discussions, it becomes circular, and you find yourself thinking, oh my gosh, we're back here again. But the back here again is not, you're not exactly at that same point. You're just revisiting and kind of expanding the circle around that thought or that idea. And I think that's what we really needed, as Chyla mentioned, as we had to slow down the process, and we had to revisit, because there were a lot of changes this time around. It was different than 5-6 years ago, where there really wasn't. We really didn't need to reassess mission, vision, and values at that point. We had been given the building, so we didn't even know what it meant for. We had ideas and thoughts, but we didn't really know in actuality what it meant to have the building. And now we were in a position this time around where we did. Where we could change around or make changes that reflected where we actually were, right? And that, I think, is clearly, you can clearly see that in our new mission and our new vision, and even in our values that needed to slightly adapt to support moving forward with this new strategy.
Right. Shyla, you talked a little bit about the board, and how, and again, Gabrielle, like this conversation is kind of confirming it's an iterative process, even though it may sound like the same conversation, but there's always nuances that are being added. The board played a central role alongside your both the leadership, but then the staff and the artists. How did these conversations change the way you evaluated opportunities or navigated difficult trade-off and made strategic direction alignment together?
That's a good question. Gabby, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think it gave us the opportunity to really understand where our board was, where our staff was, and not necessarily guide them or clarify for them things that didn't seem that clear. So to enable to get them to a point where they could actually make a decision, where we weren't stuck in wordsmithing, but we were more at the theory of change ideas level. I think one of the things that I feel we did really right was including our staff from the get-go, even from the kickoff meeting that we had.
Mm-hmm.
And staff came at different levels of familiarity with strategic planning, but I think it planted the seed for later on, like recently at our staff retreat, going over the strategic plan and having those aha moments and going, oh, okay, I saw where this came from, and now we're here to the actual implementation phase where, I'm taking these ideas and translating them into goals and objectives for my department.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, from your side, and I wanted, Jason, your perspective as one of, as co-lead with me on this, but we've talked about at ACG how to move from collecting input, like how is it not just collecting input, but building alignment, but also without losing the richness of those different voices. So in this particular process, how are there any thoughts or takeaways from that and how it worked?
Yeah, I think inspired by something that Gabby just said, I mean, the co-location of the different stakeholders in the same conversation was so important, because then they're hearing each other and they're appreciating the nuance and complexity, the sort of multiple truths of the whole thing as we move along in the process. I mean, I can say that, we've worked on, tens, 20s, hundreds of strategic plans at this point. And like the language that we used, for example, in the values, it's language we've never used before, right? It was quite particular to this group of people at this moment, at this organization. And honestly, that was inspired by how particular each person's contribution was, So this mosaic of perspectives, I feel like if you're listening, and then synthesizing, you're able to infuse the mission, vision, values, theory of change, and ultimately the plan with a lot of specificity that then, I mean, hopefully each person sees their own contribution in the final output. And then, as you said, Gabby, every member of the team, whether or not they're, an entry-level development coordinator or a senior staff, can see how they fit into the future success of the organization.
Additionally, we were able to build that muscle of strategic thinkers with the team by including them really early on in the process. Mm-hmm. They did come from various levels, because like you would see it where they jump in and kind of go, how does that affect my desk? when we're still talking about like mission, vision, right? So we're like, we're still way up here. Hold on a second. We're not going to talk about your desk yet. We'll have time for that. Just go along with it. Come with us. Understand, where we are at 10,000, 20,000 feet. And then how that actually starts to articulate its way down to what your actual contribution is. And then you could see that development of the staff to be able to learn how to build those muscles strategically. That was really helpful, I think, and to be able to stop and understand that. So bringing them along, we would be very intentional about like sharing where we are, how we're aligning with the board, where we are with where we're maybe with some sticking points too. We're pretty transparent about that because that was what was asked of our staff too. We want transparency, we want some visibility, what's happening. We would share that, where we are along the way so that they could actually see the whole process, even if they weren't in the room. And then additionally, when we went out to the stakeholders, we started out by doing the normal thing, going out and surveying, asking a bunch of questions, starting with the planning team. And then because we had to slow the process down and start doing the alignment and be more intentional about it, we got to go out actually months later, right? When the strategic direction was pretty well formed, not cemented, right, but formed, and start to test those theories and really understand the landscape of the arts ecosystem. And and so we were talking to funders, peers, artists. We were just talking to them months later, almost a year later, just to have these detailed conversations. Because what it felt like, oh yeah, I remember you guys were doing your strategic plan, and then you were like, wait, what happened to that? I'm like, oh no, we're back here. We're actually getting a lot closer. And then we'd have these really, really deep, beautiful conversations that actually made its way back into the plan to be able to show where we are in time and space with the arts ecosystem and what our role is in with that. And a lot of that was confirmed with those conversations. And I thought that was really, really important to spend that time to, even though they were a lot of one-on-ones. So, just myself and others out in the field asking these questions, finding out where they're, what are they working on, what are their sticking points, where are areas that they can collaborate better, what are, all of the big things. It just opened up a deeper relationship with our ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was beautiful also because in this case, sometimes it might be that you go back and there's a lot of feedback and you have to go work on where the direction, the plan based on the feedback, or accept the feedback and say, well, thank you, and this is the direction because we've done the work. But what was beautiful in this process is that people were getting more excited as you were sharing the direction and more like bought in the direction and wanting to be involved. Like even in the rooms where those conversations were happening, the level of passion and like you can physically see that, and that was beautiful. Is there any takeaway from this process, from the three of you? I want to say like something now that going through this process with those conversations and bringing people together through setting the direction and having them being part of it. Was there any highlight of that from where you're standing, or a challenge that maybe somebody who's just starting their process and want to do that would benefit from hearing it from you?
I'll say that Shyla mentioned that we had to work on board alignment, and I think what happened was because we wanted to move fast and we wanted to get the process done. We may have rushed it at the beginning, and I think what's really critical is to have the board and staff as well as active participants from the get-go. So we meet once a year in person, and then our other meetings are virtual. So I think if we're to do this again, I think having the board kicking off the strategic planning process at a planned in-person board meeting where the full board is there, so you can build trust in the process, buy-in. So that's and we got there. It just took us a little while longer. Yeah.
And that's okay also. I wanted to say it out loud because sometimes we can be so hard on ourselves and in the processes, but especially in the world we live in, but it's like you slowing down is okay. Shyla, Jason, any highlights from where you're standing?
I mean, mine was actually going to be what Gabby was in part describing, which was that March retreat that we did with the board. To me, it was just really electric to be in that room and to watch some of the smartest people you could find in a room that loves an organization just really dig in and listen, and each of them learned, I think, in a different way about themselves and the organization and how these pieces were integrated. And I think that retreat started with the board being maybe a little cautious about how ambitious the vision was. And I think by the end, they were like shouting from the rooftops about how vital this more comprehensive approach to the work was going to be. And as a facilitator, it was just a joy to kind of, with Nagam, be in the middle of all that and trying to make those connections and see. I mean, I feel like the board really left the retreat, much more, I don't know, unified even than they were when they came in.
Yeah, I think some of my biggest highlights were, yeah, that March retreat, because that changed everything, right? That unlocked all the doors. We had to get there. It was like hard to get to that point. We needed to tread lightly. Like from the CEO perspective, I had to have deep conversations with each of those board members just to kind of hear what's on their heart and mind. So then when we did get to March, I was ready to answer any of their questions, right? You might remember, I'd be like, here are all the areas that I know you're going to ask questions. I already have some ideas around them, but I want to address them first because they've already come up. And, out of the 20 that have come up through the 2 years that I had been here, here are the I'm going to boil it down to 5 and, really just address it. I'm just going to address the elephant in the room, and then we can have it out however you need to. Obviously respectfully, because they're incredibly talented and intelligent people who are really just there for the right reasons. They did have their concerns. They had their long-term concerns about the organization, what decisions were made before I got here, and where we were going in the future. And it really just needed some clarity on where that thinking was, and then where are those areas in which we were able to have that discussion. But they really did need to be part of that process the whole way. That was something I didn't anticipate as much, because they were kind of like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Because when we presented the kind of high level road to 29, it was very ambitious. It was very kind of, here are a few things we're thinking of. There's 7, right? So now we have 3. There were 7 of these giant ideas, and we still hadn't boiled them down. They're like, that sounds great. It sounds like something we've been really wanting to get to. And then we get to strategic direction. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. And what about the building? Like, what are we doing with the building? So lots of homework on the back end for the staff. I mean, Gabby had led the charge on how we were going to get after this building. And then how does that fit into the strategic plan? All those needed to be in play before we needed to have that deep conversation that unlocked the next iteration that got us to the end point. And then I think the board started to like each other more along the way, because they didn't know each other enough and they hadn't had to make these big decisions. But, with Nagam and Jason, both of you, really want to commend you for helping us drive that clarity and lead those discussions. Jason, you were instrumental in being able to get them to be like, okay, is that, do you want more discussion? Like, is this clarity? Because they were sort of fuzzy about it, or they sort of like matrix it, they would just kind of not quite answer the question, or not quite have the hard discussion, or maybe didn't want to pipe up, but then they wanted to have a side conversation with me. Versus we did actually create a high performing team in the process of this, which is exactly what we needed them to do. They needed to be operating on all cylinders, like absolutely, for us to be able to move this forward with an ambitious goal and a very, very detailed, clear strategic plan. Like, we needed them there. So along the process, we actually got them ready. And I believe that they're actually at this high performing space.
Yeah, and I want to back at you both for creating that environment, because it's for Jason to do the amazing facilitation that he did in that retreat, or in general for whoever is the consultant team is. I'm sure a lot of people outside, it's just like, it's looking at this as a partnership, even with the leadership of the staff, leadership of the organization, with both of you and us, and being transparent to with each other and brainstorming together, how are we going to move this, that created also the conditions for it to move forward. For those who are watching right now, and I see there's people from Ohio, there's San Diego, Ithaca, New York, Bailey, Springfield, Illinois, Minneapolis, and don't know Native Arts and Culture Foundation. Shyla, coming out of this process, how can, what is this? We've been teasing the strategic direction.
Mhm.
Can you tell us what is the organization and where is it going, especially after this whole strategic planning process?
Yeah, I mean, originally when we originated, it was about creating resources and support for Native artists, right? We went more into individual artists and saw a varying degree of impact over the 16, 17 years we've been in business. Um, it's an opportunity now, after seeing the evolution of the organization, that now what we've been able to identify is that there's space for us to strengthen the ecosystem around allowing artists to be more successful, Native artists more successfully, because a lot of the culture, a lot of the systems aren't just built for Native artists, right? So there's that piece of it. Now we have an opportunity to really look at the ecosystem itself, understand what systems change can look like around Native artists more specifically, because that's our focus, and then start to figure out how does that work, and how do we uplift the environment for artists to thrive. And it's going to happen in three different ways, right? So we look at the capital infrastructure, the resources, and the financial entities that help support Native artists, because it's a job, it's a way of living for them. Their voices are important to us. The way that they derive their materials, the stories, like where it comes from, is very important. We believe it's very important. To the world. And then one thing that from our deep dives and landscape analysis, the field coordination is incredibly important. So how do we work together better? Are there opportunities for us to remove duplicate efforts? Can we collectively move this change forward? And so the field coordination is incredibly important. And then the last is place and space. What were we going to do with the building? That was the big $1 million question, or the multi-million-dollar question, really. And so the place and space we have in Portland, Oregon, it was a beautiful gift to us, a 40,000 square foot historic building. The original goal was to just transform it into an art space that the artist could use, and the goal was to just transform it completely. And we realized we don't have to be all things to everybody, but we can be a piece of it. So place and space, based in Portland, Oregon, being part of an arts ecosystem, and then transforming it into an arts hub, right? So one, how do we support the local economy, and then what do we learn from that as we're able to plug into networks across the country, because we're a national organization, that allow for artists to move freely throughout the country and find the opportunities that are necessary. So we're identifying about 12 arts hub networks across the country. Who are those partners? What do they do? So what disciplines? How do they find those opportunities? A lot of them, they would have to go search it themselves. We can actually be part of that network, so that we're able to create a more fluidity for artists to be able to kind of travel throughout. So we're talking to academia, we're talking to other like-minded organizations, we're talking to those that are very centered in rural areas, which we know there's not a lot of opportunity for some of our Native artists in the rural settings. And then we're understanding, how do you show up for a region, for a city, for a small town? We're learning that by just being in Portland too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it all starts, right? Those are the kind of top three. But you all helped me identify, which is kind of like, oh yeah, of course. what are the enabling features for our capacity building for the organization? I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, that's a given. We needed that piece of it. We need that foundational level to be able to, to run the engine, as cleanly as possible. So there's that piece of it. And then what we know is really important is how do we tell the stories of Native artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the way that is the most authentic, that is the most powerful, because we believe that is entirely important for the Native artist, to tell their story to the world in the way that they want to hear it, the way they want to share it.
So beautiful, beautifully said, and exciting too. And it's the big direction. And I can't wait for us. Maybe we'll do a LinkedIn Live in 5 years and see how's it going before the new process starts. I know we're a little bit over time, but I just wanted to thank you both for choosing ACG to be part of this process with you. I want to shout out everybody that's been on the process on your side, from staff to artists to community members to board members, because they all their contributions made that process more rich in that way. And then also shout out the people behind the scenes at ACG, whether Andrea, Howell Sims, that have been part of this project team in different aspects of this project along me and Jason. One last, for people who are, if we want to zoom out and just to go back to our title, Beyond the Plan, strategic planning, and if we're going to look beyond the plan, for organizations or leaders that are thinking about their next process or about to start their next planning process. Of course, I want to say, talk to us, ACG, and talk to Jason, but beyond ACG, whether they're doing it with ACG or somebody else, what is one tip or nugget that now that you're at the end of the process? And we've shared multiple nuggets, but if you want to pick one from your perspective, Shyla as the CEO, from your perspective, Gabby, and then Jason as also a facilitator and one of the project leads on the consultant side or that side. What, just one, the top one that comes to mind?
I think for me, it's just be flexible, be very open. I thought I had an idea of how things needed to go, and that wasn't the case, and I think that it was sort of humbling to be like, okay, we're trying to go. That was it was important to stay open. I think that's the big takeaway. Just stay very open. Listen, know that you can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Gabby?
I think I'll go back to what I was mentioning before. I think just remembering that this is a circular and iterative process, that it is not linear, and just be patient and not get frustrated when you feel like you're just spinning the wheels. I think there is, some validity there in spinning the wheels and getting unstuck from the mud, if you will, and then moving forward.
That's a great point. I kind of want to put sometimes in the proposals, like, frustration might happen here. Frustrations might happen here. Like, call out. This is going to happen, and it's normal part of the process. Jason, what about you?
For me, the concept that we had not originally thought we would use and then did, that I thought kind of brought everything together, was this concept of theory of change, which we pulled from the social sector and applied it to arts and culture in a way that I hadn't honestly really seen done before. But I think it was the way that the organization was able to figure out the logic that connected the different pieces together, from the activities through the ripple of impact, not just within the Native community, but ultimately saying that Native artists are a beacon for the whole world. So that's something we probably should do a LinkedIn Live, an Arts Insights Live, just about that concept, because I found it to be really galvanizing and clarifying.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. For me, it was just the relationship across all of the steps and across the process, and the importance of leading from that, which is a thing we try to bring as ACG, but even among the different members that are participating in the process. Thank you again for today's conversation. Thank you for being for choosing ACG for this process. If you haven't, I think this was a great introduction about the organization for those of you who are watching and haven't heard about Native Arts and Culture Foundation. We're going to put the link in the comments, so make sure to check them out and what they're doing and support and help move the direction forward in whatever capacity you can. Jason, Shyla, Gabriella, thank you so much for your time today and for your insights. And we'll stay in touch, of course, and we'll be talking. And for those of you who tuned in today, or if you're watching the recording later, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, take care. Thank you.